So how do you make passive income? Well, find the money to start using it to invest. That's how, right? And I know that may not be the answer you're looking for. It's just how do I, have money to make money, right? Because some of you might be looking for passive income with no money at all. But the truth is, if you don't want to put time and energy into it, you may have to put some money into it. The question is, where do you find that money? Because you might have some money hiding that you don't even know about. So let's talk about where that might be. All right, so in this video, I'm going to talk about if you're trying to figure out how to make passive income, where do you start? Where do you look to find it? Like, what are the strategies you can do? In fact, I'll talk about my favorite strategies that help me create passive income faster than what most people will teach you here online. All right, so number one, how much money do you need to start to create passive income? Now, like I mentioned before, if you don't have any money, you got only two things. You have time and energy you have to create, right? You have to start using that to generate income. It's just like when you're trying to get a job. You don't obviously pay your employer money. You don't say, hey, if I pay you $50,000 right now, will you pay me $70,000 a year? That's not how it works, right? They say, no, I need your labor. I need your time and your energy and your talents and everything to use to create value for a company so that money comes back. So if you don't have any money to start with, that's your first step, is start finding ways to generate more money and then take that money and save it up until you have enough to then go in and put in these investments. There are investments out there that you could have as little as maybe $1,000 and you create some passive income. I would tell you this though, as wise advice for you, don't even worry about investing for passive income until you have at least $100,000. Now that might sound like a lot of money depending on where you're starting right now, but if you're like, I don't even have 1,000, that's okay. Because even that $1,000 investment, what I don't want you to do is just go into that one investment and you're gambling it all in, because here's what happens every time. I get somebody that comes to me, usually a friend that Facebook messages me or something like that. They'll say, hey Chris, I finally have a lot of money. I have $10,000. What do I do with it? Well, most investments like I talk about here, especially alternative investments, like things that are backed by real estate, usually require at least $25,000, $50,000, or even $100,000 in the first place. So if you have 10,000 bucks, you really can't do a whole lot. And even when there are investments that can do that, they don't pay a lot anyways. Because imagine this, imagine you have $10,000, you're like, yes, I got 10,000 bucks. All right, let's put it somewhere I'm making 7% return. Well, that's 700 bucks a year. You go from 10,000 to 10,700. Do you think that really moves the needle a whole lot? It doesn't. So this is why I go back to, if you don't have at least $100,000 to start, find ways to generate more income, whether it be in your job, in your business, or even a side hustle, whatever it might be. It's going to require time and energy to get it up to that point. And now there are better places you can save your money. We talk about on this channel a lot, we talk about infinite banking, specifically max ROI infinite banking, where you can actually get your money working harder for you and building and growing faster than it would just sitting in a bank. Now that does take several years to do too. So don't think that you're going to get rich overnight. None of this is get rich quick. In fact, if you have anybody that's telling you to create passive income with no money or it's get rich quick, don't believe them, because they're full of crap. If it's get rich quick and it's legitimate, it usually means you have to, again, put a lot of time and energy into that to be able to get your money to work harder for you. So don't for one second believe that if you're trying to create real passive income, it's going to require no money. So like I said, if you want to have good money working harder for you, real passive income, minimum at least $100,000. Even for our clients, when they want to work with us and hire us as consultants, we generally want them to have at least $150,000, just so that if something is a minimum of $50,000 investment, they could put $50,000 here, here, and here, have their money in like maybe 2 or 3 places, so they're a little bit more diversified than just throwing all their money in one place. So that's why I say at least $100,000 before you worry about passive income. Now, it doesn't mean you don't save money, it doesn't mean you can't save in better places. Now, there are some other places. I promised you on this video, I said there might be some places hiding that you don't realize it. I tell people all the time, find ways to get your money out of prison. Because if you think about it, most financial advice out there today is all about getting your money into prison. They say, hey, pay off all your debt, including your house. Pay it all off. Well, what happens when you pay off your house? Yes, you have a paid off house, you're not paying any payments on it, but now money's trapped in there. And the only way to get to it is either one, you have to sell it, which is not always the best option because you might not have a new place to move into, or two, you have to do a refinance. And that's always up to the bank. I remember in 2007, when I had a lot of equity in my house, I started throwing a lot of equity into my home. Well, I was doing that because I figured, because in 2006, 2007, you could pretty much have a heartbeat and still get a mortgage, right? They would lend money to anyone, but that was the problem. Because they lent money to everybody, there's all this high risk mortgages and things like that out there. What happened is that, of course, they started clamping it tight, right? They just shut it down. They said, nope, if you even own a business, we don't even want to give you a loan. We don't want you to cash out any money out of your houses. And so they locked up all the equity in our houses. So the money I had in my home that I thought was just like a money I could tap into later with a home equity line of credit now was no longer possible. And so I would try to sell the house, but because the banks locked up all the money for not just me, but everybody else, home prices started tanking fast because nobody could really get out of it. And then everybody was trying to sell their properties at the same time. Prices were coming down. Next thing I know, all the equity I had in my house disappeared, gone. I then all of a sudden now owed more on my mortgage than what the house is worth. And this is after having $150,000 of equity in my house. It was almost vanished, not overnight, but over the course of about 6 to 12 months. I don't want you to be in that position either. So one of the worst things I see people do is they put extra payments onto their houses and things like that, throwing their money into that equity. And I'm not opposed to having equity in a house, but you need to have cash on hand. In fact, I would have been better off during that last recession if I had cash in my possession versus throwing it in my house. If I could have gone back in time, I would have said no more paying off my mortgage early. I would just keep that cash on hand, pay them my minimum monthly payment, and that was it. So be aware that your home equity could be one of those prison places that banks and financial advisors tell you to put your money into. Another place are things like 401ks. If you have a company 401k, it is very hard to get to it. It is not an emergency fund. In fact, if you try to get to it early, they will charge you a 10% penalty and tax you on that money. On top of that, if you still work for the company, they don't want you to take it out at all. They'll make you borrow the money and then you have to pay it back with interest on every paycheck. So for example, if you borrow the max that they'll ever allow, which is $50,000, it's either 50% of your 401k balance or $50,000, whichever is less they'll let you get. Well, if you borrow $50,000, you're gonna be paying about $900 a month out of every paycheck by force. You are forced to have to pay that loan back. Well, that could be a very bad situation because that just means you're taking home less money. And if you needed that $50,000 out of that 401k, it's probably because you needed it. So that's not a great place to lock up your money. 401ks, even IRAs, again, 10% penalty in taxes if you're not 59 and a half years old. So that's another prison place that people are told to put their money. Think about it. Everything a financial advisor tells you to put your money in, paying off your house, and putting money in your 401ks and IRAs is prison. It's locked up because they don't want you to touch that money. They want you to set and forget it and never pretend like it's there. So many times we find money for our clients because we find out that, wait a minute, you've got home equity. And even though the interest rates are kind of high, we may or may not want to use it. But also we got money over here. Maybe you got money locked up. We saw other people that have money in just normal mutual funds and they just put it in there. They kind of forget about it because they're told to set it and forget it, right? They have money in old 401ks or IRAs from maybe a previous employer. An old 401k is great because we can at least get to it. Yes, there could still be a penalty in taxes if we decide to do it that way, but that is money that could be used to invest. I had one client in particular that had $150,000 in his old 401k. And so we didn't cash it out. We didn't have the penalties and taxes. We did what was called a self-directed IRA, which is you roll over into an IRA that allows you to invest it wherever you want, with a few exceptions. You can't buy artwork with it, but you can buy almost anything else with that money. And so he started using that to go and invest in different real estate deals that would then compound at much higher returns than he was getting in the stock market. There's other ways too, where you might have normal mutual funds. I have had other people that had like gold on hand. I had one guy that had $100,000 sitting in gold. And I said, wait, you can actually use this money and invest it, and it can actually turn to cash flow. Your gold won't pay you cash flow, but using some of that gold, selling it off to then go and invest in these other places could generate more cash flow for you. Bitcoin is another one. A lot of people have digital currency. They're like, it's gonna go up. Let's go to the moon, right? All that kind of crap that you hear. Well, if it's already going to the moon, that's usually the best time to sell and capture your gains. What if you sold? It doesn't mean you have to sell it all, and I'm not giving investment advice, but what if you sold some of that? What if you sold some of that money and used it to go and invest? We had another client. She had literally $5 million in stocks. Most of those stocks were individual companies, things like Google, Facebook, Nvidia, things like that. Very high risk. Apple, things like that. They're all tech stocks. They can go up really high, really fast, and they can crash really fast. And so she was looking for, is there something I can do with my money that maybe I could actually invest and make some passive income? Well, one, I told her, I said, without your whole situation, she could actually generate between $500,000 and $600,000 a year of passive income. But I said, here's the deal. Like, first and foremost, before we even worry about investing, do you realize that we've got some equity in your house and you got some other loans here? What if we paid off some of these loans, even using your home equity, we refinance your mortgage, pay those things off, we can actually free up $3,800 a month. So even before she invested a single dime, we said, let's do this instead. Refinance your house, free up the money. Even with the payment and everything, it's still freed up $3,800 a month. Then I said, now we got this other stuff, your stocks we can use. You can actually use this to go invest in things like real estate that generate consistent income, maybe 10% a year, 10, 11, 12% a year, whatever it might be. So she started doing that. Now, they only cashed out a few million. They still kept some stocks too. So it doesn't mean you have to take all your money out of prison, but she took some of that money out of their stocks, a couple million of it, sold them off, now has passive income coming in of a couple $100,000 a year that's able to more than pay for what they need. So they were able to go from, hey, I hope I can retire in 10 years or so, to we can retire this year because they have enough income coming in to pay for it. Because one, we lowered their expenses by $3,800, almost $4,000 a month, and then two, generated another $200,000 a year on top of it. That's $20,000 a month, or about $240,000 a year that they now have in additional cash flow that they never thought they could have. We just had to get their money out of prison to get it working harder for them. So now they don't have to work so hard for it. All right, so let me talk briefly about my favorite investments. Things like lending. I can lend my money, I can be the bank, I can lend my money to other investors, right? I can let them do it, and that's where they might pay me 10, 11, or 12% or more sometimes. I can do turnkey real estate properties where I can buy property anywhere in the country, and then the property manager deals with all the hassles. They deal with the tenants, the toilets, and the trash. I don't have to. I collect the checks after they get their small management fee, and I get all the rest, right? Love that. That's been one of my biggest growing assets of all. I can do partnerships. One of my biggest investments recently is I have a raw land partnership where they're buying and selling raw land. People are paying us their mortgage payments for those land, and already over 400,000 is generating over $11,000 a month. So there's so many different things you can do beyond just the stock market and everything else that you can use to generate passive income. And that's truly passive income, where again, you're not working hard for it so you can make that money. Now, if you're wondering how you could actually create passive income for yourself, go to moneyripples.com, click on passive income calculator, and you can see in your situation, including all the places that might be that money hidden, that maybe is locked up in prison, where that money could actually be used to generate more income. Go and fill out that calculator now to see what your number is today.